There is a subliminal power in fear. Fear is like a computer software program that, once successfully installed in the human psyche, it overrides basic logical functions and behaviors. Fear sets boundaries and dictates what you will and won't do. Fear can instantly paralyze a person once they meet the stimulus that induces fear. All you have to do is put the fear-inducing stimulus at every setting or environment of a person's life and activity, and you basically place them in a psychological prison. They won't go to this specific destination if that stimulus is there. They won't participate in any activity if that stimulus is present. Why they can't even rest well because of nightmares. The stimulus has embedded and encoded itself present in their psyche and manifests in their dreams. Now, we have to move into the power of a word called association. The word association. Simply put, association is the mental process of creating a relationship between two or more things. This is how babies associate breasts with feeding, how we associate the word green with money, or to go, or vegetation, because we encode the word green with a color of the light spectrum, and the most frequent times we see it manifested in our everyday activities. We associate frowning with displeasure, anger, and rage. We associate smiling with pleasure, satisfaction, joy, and elation. Social engineers are masters of the power of association. This is how we associate symbols, logos, icons, or color patterns with corporate brand names. So now, let's associate the relationship between fear and power. Fear and power. The phrase rule by force comes to mind. For the average person seeking a peaceful, non-confrontational, and harmonious life, they usually avoid, acquiesce, and kowtow to threats of violence and death if it permits them to live undisturbed. This is how rules and compliance policies are often placed upon people in an authoritarian dictatorship style of governance. You can move along peacefully as long as you follow my rules, or death and physical assault will follow. Nazi Germany was one of the best illustrations of the dynamic association between fear and power. American slavery is one of the best illustrations of the dynamic associations between fear and power. Two symbols blacks and Jews recognize through the association of rule, power, dominance, and fear is the swastika and the noose. Death, discomfort, and pain are associated with that. But there is one other association between power and fear I want to elucidate. That is the white male face and the well-trained, historically encoded association of power and dominance through destructive, demonic, anarchist, terroristic, barbaric, and maniacal methods incorporated in their strategies to achieve power and dominance and control and influence. From Indians, or shall I say indigenous natives of the North American continent. They called the invading white European, they called him, what did they call him? Paleface. And they had to deal with the barbarism and the slaughter and the death and the carnage and the purging of occupying European invaders that posed as allies and friends but annihilated millions of natives in North America, and commandeered and usurped and pillaged millions of acres under the idea of manifest destiny. That white male pale face. Behold a pale horse. Why the Asians, and specifically the Vietnamese, will forever have the horrific trauma of national annihilation of a society. Specifically speaking of how the white male of North America dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and demolished their society for generations. Even citizens of the United States operate under the will of the white male pale face when we look at the statistical majority of mass shooters and anarchists and serial killers. We are talking about that white male pale face. What are we talking about? Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Timothy McVeigh, the son of Sam, Ted Bundy, the Green River Killer, the Zodiac Killer, the Colorado movie shooter, the Columbine high school shooters, the Las Vegas, Nevada shooter, Dylan Roof, the El Paso, Texas Walmart shooter, the Charlottesville Tiki Torch toters, the Boston Strangler, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, H.H. Holmes, Eric Rudolph, and this is just a teaspoon of terror, a teaspoon of terror. Why, even Dennis the Menace in a cartoon invoked fear and terror in his local community. Him and his nerdy friend Joey, who he exploited his genius to help execute his plans. Then we have to stop and analyze and say, hey, life imitates art and art imitates life. And we see propaganda wrapped in the cloak of Hollywood entertainment that perpetuates the mental conditioning, that enhances and reinforces the association between white male pale face and power through fear and intimidation. You look at Hollywood's big blockbuster horror films, and the menacing villains has always had this white male pale face that did whatever horrific thing you can think of to victims. The delight and pleasure they derived in the savage butchery of innocent people. The joy of inflicting pain and seeing victims give them reverence and deference to them in fear. This white male pale face with nuanced facial features in each villain evoke that same visceral and psycho-emotional havoc like clockwork. And you have to ask yourself, why is this always presented to us like this? Why is always the crucial question. Is this the nature of the white male? Or are they trying to subliminally and subconsciously trying to train us to fear the white male and forfeit our power and human rights because of a threat of violence that we too can invoke and tap into and match? But the paralysis of fear won't let us. And even if you can't see that white male pale face, they also had pointed white sheets to keep consistent with the theme. Conditioned to fearing whiteness.